Well, I think that opens the door to one of the other main questions I want to ask you. I really want to hear about this motorcycle banjo thing. Like, it sounds so interesting. Sounds like such a big lifestyle choice
Yeah.
to do that for a while. I mean, where did that come from?
Well, I don't know. It came from the same. Here's another. Like I'm talking about all this stuff. Um, the idea for that project hit me with the same power and in the same way as the idea for every novel or every poem that's been successful or even the unsuccessful ones. Like it's just a thing that came to my head. And one of the things that I was talking about in my writing up today was that I've spent decades now just cultivating receptivity. Like stream of nonsense in my head is going all the time, and not in a bad way. And I've just learned to pay attention to the things with some energy. And I've been doing that for a long time and cultivating a world and an environment and a lifestyle in which I can do that and get rewarded for it. Now there's a whole bunch of luck involved. Everybody, I have been very fortunate. Uh, but I have two responses to people who say you're just lucky. One of them is I work my ass off and I have failed many more times than I have succeeded. And I have put myself in the crosshairs of luck consciously and actively for longer than I can remember.
Mm.
Uh, one of the there are two phrases that are kind of aphorisms or catchphrases that I'm trying to filter in throughout this motorcycle ride book. One of them is, uh, which one should I start with? One of them is, there ain't no notes on a banjo, son. You just play it, right? And it's all about overthinking. Like I couldn't play the banjo because I was trying too hard to play the banjo. When I just stopped all the nonsense and started making noise, I started having a good time. The other one is, you go where you look, right? And that's like motorcycle wisdom from the get-go. If you're riding into a corner and there's a dead possum in the corner and you think, I better not hit that fucking possum, but you look at that possum, you're going to hit that possum.
Hmm.
You go where you look. Well, I have been looking consciously, proactively for a long time now towards a life that I want, a life in which I can do what I want with my imagination and my time. So I'm 21 years into an academic career in which the first 3 or 4 years I had massive success with a couple of novels, and it allowed me to do all these other things. So I just kind of pay attention. And because I paint and make music, I was able to I was able to and we have a program called Integrative Arts. I was able to get my title, professor of English and Integrative Arts. Well, there's so much bullshit you can put under the umbrella of integrative arts, right? I can propose almost anything. And one day, last, I guess it was last spring, I was walking around, we were still in COVID, and I thought, huh. And I had just gotten this motorcycle, or had the idea for or I put a down payment on the bike. Like I'd been without a bike for a while. And I thought, huh, I could go for a ride on that motorcycle and take a banjo. And that was it. That was the core of the idea. And then it just kind of developed. And I approached the development of that project like I did with a novel. I was like, all these themes are going to happen, all this actual material has to happen, all this equipment has to happen. And it was just like outlining any other kind of story or project. It was an awesome experience that that changed as I did it, but also gave me everything I wanted it to give me. I mean, yeah, I don't know what else you want to know about it. It was awesome.
So I wanted to ask you who some of your banjo heroes are.
That was a hard list to make because I've got a lot of them. I initially made this list and was headed all the way down to Mississippi for um, oh my God, what's his name? I definitely need more caffeine. Um, he sang Boll Weaver, Charlie Patton. Charlie Patton? I think it was Charlie Patton. But in the end, Charlie Patton was more of a guitar player. So the people I ended up visiting, I'll tell you in order. And there are so many others that I would have visited, but I had to, the the realist in me steps in. Plus, I was riding a fairly modest little motorcycle, 650 cc's is, not the most comfortable thing. So I visited Roscoe Holcomb in Kentucky. I visited Doc Boggs in Virginia. I visited Uncle Dave Macon in Woodbury, Tennessee. I visited Bascom Lamar Lunsford in just north of Asheville. Tom Clarence Ashley, also up near Asheville or Mountain City, Tennessee. And then back to my home state of North Carolina, I visited the hardest grave for me to find, the most fringe player, this old African-American man, Dink Roberts. Just very fringe, very raw, but his sound has moved me since the first time I heard it. And then the last grave I visited was not a player, but it was a famous, very famous murder victim, Omi Wise. So I went to Omi Wise's grave and sang Omi Wise to her. And yeah, it was pretty awesome.
This is
a tiny little banjo. What?
This is the coolest project I've ever heard of.
It was so fun. I mean, and there was a lot of changes in the nature of the project along the way that are kind of informed by the stuff that we've been talking about. You know, I of course I had these fantasies that, you know, part way along the way I would become a YouTube superstar and people would be following me. And then I just kind of stopped making those videos along the way because I fell in love with writing about the project, and I hadn't written the book in a while. In fact, I was saying I might be done writing because it's too much of a pain, but I fell in love with writing. So I stopped crafting little videos at night to put up, you know, for my whatever fan base I had. I still recorded everything at the graves, but I'm coming to the conclusion that I do not want to be a performing musician. I'm not there yet. I'm not quite ready to give it up yet. It doesn't mean I'll ever stop playing music and making just nonsense noise with friends, but that trip kind of led me to something else. So I've got all this footage, you know, I've got riding footage that only motorcycle people would be interested in. I've got 3 different camera views of me at all these weird grades and all these weird situations. Yeah, it was very fulfilling, and also long, like 21 days, 2,500 miles on a 650cc motorcycle. Of those 2,500 miles, probably 2,200 were curvy mountain roads. So I was ready for some straight roads by the time I got home.
So I hate to admit that I am not familiar with a lot of these names that you've listed. Are these all of a similar banjo playing style, or are they all kind of different?
There's a whole bunch of overlap, and a whole bunch of overlap in their degree of presence in the world of music, old time music. For instance, Bascom Lamar Lunsford, who's Asheville based, you know, and they're all in, you know, born late 1800s, died by the mid 1900s, and many earlier than that. So their time frame is the same. Bascom Lamar Lunsford was a lawyer, you know, an Asheville, North Carolina kind of muckety muck, also a horrible racist and anti-Semite, I believe. But I will address that in the book. I wasn't about the politics of these people. I was about their sound. But he was really, really important in what was the festival called? I mean, it was an Asheville, North Carolina festival in which he did the thing that we were talking about early in this podcast, like carrying tradition even from further back and kind of keeping it alive and vibrant. So he's really instrumental in that. Uncle Dave Macon is Tennessee, like the first Grand Ole Opry kind of star, and also a rabble rouser. Like I would say he's kind of the possibly the Marilyn Manson of the band, just a rowdy, big gold tooth and flamboyant. The other couple of players or 3 or 4 players are just hard hit working class coal mine, and music for them. It was about it was pulling stuff out of the coal mines and out of the coal mines all the way from across the ocean and sort of keeping it alive. And then there was Dink Roberts, who there's not much, like his was the grave that was hardest to find. There was no grave marker, and I was told that, but that his wife probably had a grave marker. And I pull up into this church, and this is North Carolina, the end of the trip, and I was tired, and there were 3 churches there in this within a couple of blocks. One of them was derelict and back of the back, and I thought, all right, that must be it. And I went back to the church, and there were really kind of three little graveyards, and I walked around all of them, and I didn't see anybody, I didn't see his name or his wife's name. And I thought, well, I'm just going to set up and do my stuff here. Like I had a whole ritual that I did. Um, and I kind of started getting my gear out, and then I saw past this pretty large tree, a little like a cut away in some brush, and there were a handful of graves back there, and there were a bunch of graves lined with cinder blocks, big blocks, but then off to the side there were just two graves lined in bricks. They didn't even get cinder blocks; they just got bricks. And his wife was named in one, and I felt that indentation was him. And his music is raw and old, and he giggles a lot. And you just like, if you look for him on YouTube, Dink Roberts, he's got this look in his eye that I saw in my grandfather's eye, and I feel like that has something to do with my draw towards him. His music is very raw and ragged. I'm also drawn to that. So all these people that I talk about, and even the ones I dismissed in the world of old time music, most of them are pretty well known, and that's a pretty rich subculture. There's lots of, like, nationwide, and even in the UK and Europe, there's a big subculture of old time. Really, there's a subculture of everything. It doesn't. If you name something, there's some group of lunatics who are obsessed with it.
Right. What about on a, like, what can you tell me on a, I don't want to get too personal, but like spiritually, I'm curious about this, because that probably is a different realm for a lot of people as far as what it all means. But I mean, I guess, can you talk at all about, like, maybe what your belief is about what is happening here in this space where you in this physical form are going to these places where these bodies are resting? Do you feel like you're like having do you feel as though you're connecting with them, like, in a real way?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like that is a question that I get. Like, what? In fact, the Clarence Ashley's grave. I just, because I believe in asking and just sort of seeing, I had made this connection with someone who grew up in the area and was part of the musical realm. And I said, I'm looking for a place to stay. So I ended up staying at his house. Do you know the name Doc Watson? Do you know his name?
Yeah.
So Doc Watson played with Clarence Ashley. So I stayed in the house in which Doc Watson and Clarence Ashley sat on the porch for hours and hours and hours playing. And I felt the ghosts of those guys, man. I really, really felt it. But their relatives were there. And that was the most social event that I had for the entire trip, and had these great conversations. But this one woman said, did you feel anything there? And yes, like, like, I am a non-believing, would even call myself an anti-theist. I think that religion has done more harm than good, right? I'll go ahead and say that. Don't really believe in ghosts or supernatural stuff, but I believe in ghosts and supernatural stuff.
Yeah.
It's just fun. And part of my flow and my process, I'm just willing to go there for the sake of this experience and narrative story. So there's going to be a ghostly presence in this thing. And I felt it. I scientifically don't believe it, but I felt it, and I don't care to differentiate between those two. So, the title of this, I don't know if I even put that on any information anybody could know yet. The book title that I'm writing right now, if it sticks, will be called Motorcycles, Minotaurs, and Banjos, A Modest Odyssey. And it is this kind of spiritual journey out of, like, I equate minotaurs and banjos. They're both mongrels. They're both rowdy outsiders. The banjo players are often just hard heads. They're those guys. And that's where I came from. So I'm definitely equating this kind of outsiderness, and the minotaur character that I have written about for 20 years now is not a fierce beast. He's a sad old guy who cooks in a restaurant and has a big fat tongue so he can't speak. So this notion of feeling like you're the freak in the room with horns and your tongue is too thick for you to speak it goes hand in hand with playing banjos to me. And all of the players that I went to visit, uh, even the successful ones, either came from or never escaped that fringe outsiderness.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? And
Yes.
so I'm trying to, it's again, it's like the continuum that we're talking about. I'm trying to sort of just tap into something that's already present and ride it for a while.
Yes, yes, sir. I mean, I feel like we have more in common than I think I realized when we started the conversation. I was a pretty avid anti-theist for a while, and I think a lot of what you're describing is what has made that not as much part of my life. Almost exactly what you said. Like, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in spirituality, but I enjoy believing in it, and I don't feel the need to make that distinction.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm right there with you, man. And I think it's the not necessarily in a religious way, but mythology in almost every sense of it, including religion to some degree. Like, I think the mythological, the belief aspect of what it means to use symbolism to explain how you want to try to interact with the world, I think is like a fascinating, beautiful thing sometimes. And I do think it's exactly a part of what you're talking about, a part of tapping into the traditions within art and carrying them forward in some kind of way.
I mean, it's a thing that we have done since before we were language beat creatures. You know, we have used symbols, and we will always do that. And you know, when I first claimed the title atheist and then went into anti-theist, I was adamant and sort of proselytized. I love to use religious words in an atheistic way. You know, I'm a devout atheist and a proselytizing anti-theist, and that was about learning. We were talking about this earlier. That was me kind of figuring out my role and my identity. And the reality is, I don't want to take away anybody's comfort. I don't care. I don't care what kind of nonsense you believe in. You know, as long as you're not telling me, you know, who I can marry and who I have to kill, which it comes down to that often. I don't care what you believe and whatever. Uh, I do whenever I sort of sneak it in though, whenever inevitably in any creative writing class, there's the opportunity to talk about some Bible story. And I always say in the Christian mythology, you know, I always sort of get that in there, and it's going to resonate with some of them it won't. But that's enough for me. I don't need to push them any further than that.
Yeah.
And then I'm willing to talk about anybody who's interested in changing their beliefs. I have no interest in arguing with someone about the validity or solidity of my beliefs. If you want to come from your Christian belief system into what I think is the right one, let's talk about it. Don't try to convince me of anything.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So then there's the problem of gospel music because it's so damn good. But
It's
like,
so good. Well, again, it's like I say this, I've said this so many times. I do have this condition. It's not really a condition, but it seems pretty real. I have a hard time understanding lyrics in almost every song. I really do, unless they're really precise and clear. Uh, I don't know, and maybe I'm embellishing a little bit of that, but I have the same. It is possible for me to get the exact same pleasure, deep, focused pleasure out of these old gospel songs and a Lil Wayne rap song. Like it's the sonic experience that I'm after. Now, having grown up in the South and in a church, I don't think I've been able to completely like squash the sentiment of some of those old really weird gospel. Did you grow up in church?
I did, yeah.
What kind of church?
A Baptist church.
So you know the song "Just as I Am," walking up to the altar. Yeah, it's like I can't help but like that. There's a little weird trickle in there, and it's a ridiculous experience, but it's going to be there. So I'm not completely able to separate all that stuff. But the music I was telling you about earlier, sacred harp stuff. Like when we're done, I'll send you an email to remind you. You have to look up Sacred Harp and also Fisherman's Friends sea shanties. And there's a movie about those guys. They're awesome. But Sacred Harp is just, I mean, it's purely sacred, like Baptist fire, hell, slam on the Lord's going to smite you down. But I love all the sound. And I am absolutely able to compartmentalize all that meaning with the sonic experience. I mean, with shape note in particular, which is gospel stuff, there's a pretty big subculture of that too, all over the country, all over the UK and Europe, and it's in the eastern corridor here of the US anyway. It's pretty deeply, the young people are lots of Jews, so they're able, they're able to parse that out and have the sonic experience. They're not there singing about the Lord; they're there singing, and I feel like I'm able to do that. But as a storyteller, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little excited. As a storyteller, those old gospel songs do some great stuff, So I am also interested in seeing how that works and exploring that. So I respect a thing. Like there are many elements. There's the content, there's the sound, and then there's the craft involved, right? And all of those are functioning together. The meaning of those lyrics are the least important of those things to me, and I can easily dismiss that. And the same goes true for the worst, nastiest rap music. Like I like all of that stuff too. So for the same reasons.
Yeah, yeah. So, but that is particularly interesting because you're a writer too, and I wonder if that what does that have in common with the way that you view, like the way that you approach writing a novel? Like, is it more about is writing a novel for you about the sort of like almost the linguistic experience also more than the meaning necessarily of the words?
No, that's a very interesting point, Tyler. So how am I going to get here? For me, rare is the song that moves me at the literary level and the sonic level. Right? I'm willing to forgive schlocky, sentimental, bad, whatever songwriting for the sake of the sonic structure, even if it's just, the syllabic sounds the mouths are making. I have said more than once, and I don't think this is going to change. I don't think I have anything to contribute, or possibly even the skill to contribute to the world of good songwriting. I just don't think I have that. And I don't feel the lack. It's not like I'm feeling bad about it, because I'm pretty good with words in other realms. But it's an interesting, what's the word I would use? Like it is a point. It is a point that words are probably the most important thing to me, and their meaning and their construction, their order, all of that. And the meaning is very important, except in the realm of songs.
That is so interesting to me.
I don't really know why. I mean, I think it might even be, there might not be much depth there. It might be for the sake of just expedition, like just allowing me into the music. Like I do my word stuff over here. I don't need to do it in this realm. Right. There are occasionally songs that just kick me hard with the words and the meaning. But those are few and far between. But music and song in general is unparalleled in how important it is to me. So I don't know. It's an odd thing, but it's not a thing I struggle with. Like I just don't care.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's super interesting. Music does serve a particular purpose. And the fact that there's a sonic element to it at all differentiates it from the purpose of pure literature. So
yeah,
I can definitely see why it would be in a slightly different category for you, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we sing, when we were doing the shanty choir business and performing and the shape note stuff, there are lots of poignant moments, big epic narratives that happen in these songs, but mostly for those things, like there's some of them that really get me, but some of them it's just the resolution of the sound or the foot stomping chorus, all this stuff. It's just rarely the words.